Hello, internet friends. Welcome back once again. Thank you all so very much for joining me here today. I apologize for my absence, but I promise you that there has been a good reason for that. It has not been laziness, and this is not like some of the more recent times when I've sort of gone dark online and shown up and felt like I had been overwhelmed, and that is not the case right now. To be honest, I have been thinking about making this particular video for a few weeks, and I kind of wanted to make sure that some of the things I was going to talk about really held up through the process. And what I ended up with is this idea where I would either break it up into a series or I would do one kind of long form video that is similar to what I have done in the past, where I like to do. You guys who are familiar with my channel know I will post lifting in the background and kind of talk over it. Regardless of what is happening in the video, the topics kind of are on their own and more about life, more about the mentality behind the process. So that's sort of what's going to happen. But this is more of an extreme example of that, in that we've got quite a lot to talk about in this video, and you're going to see how long it ends up being. It's more than one of my normal kind of 5 to 10 minute sort of discussions, and it really does encompass the lifting you'll be watching is my last 2 weeks prepping for Raw Nationals before we did kind of a taper week and went into Atlanta. If you hear that my voice feels a little different to your ear, that is largely because I have been in the process of getting my voice back. When we were down in Atlanta, there was a lot of yelling, cheering, talking in an elevated noise environment, which really did take a toll on my vocal cords. But I will say, spoiler alert, I did have a wonderful experience. I got to meet so many people, a lot of people who had seen my videos in the past, and it was enriching and encouraging to get to talk to some of them and really feel in person the effect that some of the ideas I've discussed in the past have had on their lives, and in turn has made every single thing throughout this process and journey for me more than well worth it, as well as getting a chance to compete on a high level with a field of very incredible athletes and all around great people. So first and foremost, thank you to everybody that I had a chance to talk with or just be near in that environment. This community is truly amazing, and I feel so lucky and fortunate to be a part of that. And hopefully moving forward, I can continue to sort of refine my role in this community and help to continue to encourage others and to draw encouragement from those that are sharing this process, and from those that are even kind of external to that. The people, we're all involved in something that involves chasing your passion. That's why you're here. I would hope that's why you're here. If you're just here to support me and aren't passionate about anything, thank you for that. But I think that we'd be hard pressed to find ourselves in a position where we don't have something that we care enough about to want to improve on, and that's kind of the purpose of what I really want to get into in this video. And so I guess to start off, in the last few videos that I had posted, I kind of have alluded to some of the external factors that sort of opened me up to a position of a bit of regression and fallback, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more in depth as to what those were, because I think that for the sake of some of the ideas we're going to get into here, a little bit of history is necessary to kind of grasp what we're going to be talking about. So I hope you guys will bear with me. I don't want this to come across as being complaining or oh poor me. I'm not looking for sympathy. These are just a couple of the things that I think are important for painting the background of kind of what has been happening to change a lot of my perceptions and the way that I have been approaching training recently, that has really turned around from being what I would say is at kind of an all-time low for me mentally and even physically, a pretty low point, to be able to kind of chase a high level of performance and expectations for myself once again. So I qualified for the USAPL Raw Nationals in February, and it was not my best meet in history. It was my first full USAPL meet. It was a good time. It was a good experience. The meet itself was great. My performance did not reflect the abilities that I felt like I had earned throughout, because my execution of the plan was flawed. I made some mistakes, but overall I walked away feeling encouraged and excited about the next step of my journey. After that happened, there were a few small things that kind of built up that kind of opened the door for some negative mental things to sort of sneak in and creep within my mind that did set me back pretty far. The first one was a negative that was painted in a positive thing. It was kind of hidden in that I went to California with my a cappella group for 10 days. It was a great experience. We had a great time. But what that also did was it kind of pulled me off of my regiment, off of my schedule. And I am the kind of person who really thrives on having regiment. I can eat the same thing every day and not complain. I can go through the same kind of, almost people would consider it monotonous day to day, and it doesn't really bug me. But once I fall out of that, it takes a lot of work and effort for me to get back onto that track. I am self-employed. I do coach for a living, and that grants me a certain level of flexibility with my working hours, which you combine that with the fact that I do have ADHD, which I do need to take my medications for. It becomes more challenging once I'm off track to kind of get myself back on track. So that was the first thing. We went down, had a great experience, but it threw me off my schedule, and I don't believe that I really ever got back on schedule. Even when I would try and do resets, there was still too many little things that I wasn't taking care of, and so I went from a place of being highly motivated in a really good spot with my training and my nutrition to I opened myself up a little bit to too much flexibility that ended up hindering me down the road. Something else that happened is I had switched my primary care physicians, and the doctor that I had wanted to get some blood work done. I don't know how many of you know this. Anybody who's new to the channel definitely wouldn't, but even most of you kind of down the line and some older who've known me for longer, that sentence didn't make sense. I have this extreme phobia of needles. When I was a little kid, I had a spinal tap, which is not as cool as the band name, where I had basically a traumatic experience that has forever put me off on needles, and I'm getting better with them now because of what has been happening, where I got some blood work done for my doctor. She wanted to check on some things since I was establishing this new care, and she found some oddities in my blood work. And what that ended up being, we still don't really know. The kind of the layman's version of it is that my blood work came back showing that I have some type of anemia, but it's not something like an iron deficiency. And for any of you who are going to offer me advice or help or suggestions, as much as I appreciate that, it's something that not only I don't really understand it fully, but my doctor and the specialist she sent me to also kind of don't understand. We looked into a lot of different things, wondering if I had like an ulcer or a slow bleed in my stomach lining. I got an ultrasound. I've been going to a specialist in Yakima who is a hematologist and a cancer specialist for the last 6 months or so, getting my blood work done every single time, and I continue to be met with the response of, we don't really know what it is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It is a little bit concerning, but the levels themselves are kind of starting to come up a little bit, and we're trying to get that figured out. So that's been going on for months, and every time I go there, it's stressful because I don't know kind of what we're going to find, if I'm going to get more answers, and the idea of going in and actually getting my blood drawn does have a more stress-inducing effect on me with my phobia of needles than it might for some other people. Like I said, I'm getting more used to it. I'm finding ways to kind of cope with that stressful environment, I suppose. And it's not a matter of, this of me like feeling like it's a normal thing. I know that it is an irrational fear. I understand that it's not. It has nothing to do with pain. It has nothing to do with the needle itself. It's just kind of the idea of it. Something triggers in my mind, and it really makes it more of a challenge for me to do that than I feel like it should be, and than it would for most people. So these kind of things were starting to happen, and I was starting to lose consistency within my own life. For those of you who don't know, I've moved houses quite a few times in the last few years. I am not a huge skillful financial person. My own value of money is probably lower than it. I know it is lower than it should be in terms of I am very bad at charging people for things that I should be charging them for. And in regards to my own coaching services, I have been very fortunate that most of my clients are more interested in paying me than I am in having them pay me. But there were a couple of instances where I feel that it was unfortunate where through my own lack of keeping up on those things, I don't blame other people for these. It's my own lack of follow through and kind of looking out for myself and my own naivety, where I allowed myself to be taken advantage of by a few people financially, and it impacted my ability to maintain the quality of life that I put myself on. Again, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not blaming anybody, and I'm not going to point to people and say this person did me wrong. But there were a few times where I left myself open to being taken advantage of financially by some people who I was working with, and I got burned by that. And so I'm learning through that process. That's just the way that life happens sometimes. If you are an overly trusting person, sometimes it's helpful to safeguard yourself so you don't get too much. It's just there are people in the world who aren't looking out for your best situation. And while that is unfortunate, that's the nature of the world, and I accept it, and I grow and learn from that. What that resulted in is a combination of that and trying to finish a few things here. Where my housing situation was uncertain, it really put a lot of impact on my life stress. I was definitely being challenged mentally and emotionally by a lack of certainty, where I was feeling this issue of a lack of permanence in what I was doing, and I needed to find a way to kind of settle and center myself in the moment, because I was so busy looking to what I was going to do and trying to figure out how I was going to survive next week or next month, whatever the situation was. And those kind of things weren't really helping me. They were just dragging me down further. I also finally went through and got things situated to finish the final class of my university career. I have been in college for a very long time. I spent about 7 years taking classes. 6 of those years I wasn't diagnosed with my ADHD, and so I struggled with things like planning for the future and I would get distracted at a large kind of in a larger sense, where I would take classes that I didn't need that sounded interesting. I'm probably one of the only people you'd know who took college classes for 7 years and didn't have my undergrad degree, and also didn't fail any classes. I just took a lot of classes that I didn't need to take. My focus and my attention in that was split more than it should have been. I learned a lot. I feel like it helped me grow as a person, but it was not ideal in terms of finishing what I had set out to do and moving forward in my academic pursuits. So I finally, 2 years ago, I applied for graduation and was told that I was missing one class that I needed and that it wasn't offered until the next year. But when that time came around, some other things happened, and I ended up, long story short, right now I'm finishing up with an equivalency course, going back to school after 2 years for one class, and then I should finish my degree. But the setting up of those details and getting it all ready to go was very stressful and definitely impacted me quite a bit. And so a lot of these, it was none of these things on their own were the catalyst for kind of my downfall mentally, but they all were contributing factors that were filling my mind and keeping me too busy up there within my own brain space, where I wasn't able to approach the things that I needed to in a confident manner, or in a mentally controlled enough manner to actually do the things and chase the goals that I was setting for myself. And so there are a few other things, but those were the big ones that I can point to and say, this kind of opened the doorway for some of the mental failings that I was having. And now, 15 minutes into the video, we're going to discuss some of the mental changes that I've made that have actually helped me respond from that. About 6 weeks before Nationals, I think a top set that I had done on my lifts was maybe a 505 squat for a triple, and it was a little rough. And you're going to see a lot of lifts in this video that are going to show that I have made some monumental progress. And it's not just through physical means. There were a few things that I was doing mentally that were stopping me from being able to take care of the details I needed to find the success that I was looking for. And that's what we're getting into now. So the first thing, kind of the thing that I needed to do first and foremost before I could do anything else, before I could make any positive progress, was I had to really accept that there was a break between my expectations and my reality. And I run into this a lot with people who are competitive themselves, who will prep for a meet or will do an event, and they have this idea of how they're going to do, and the reality doesn't reflect that, and they walk away saying, oh, I know what I should be able to do. I know that I should have been good enough to do that. And in many cases, that is the truth, where you just underperformed and you weren't able to execute. But most of the time, I tend to find that that's less about you underperforming and more about you overestimating what your actual level is. I've talked about this before, but the idea where we tend to, in our high points, we tend to rate our best performance and say that's what I'm really capable of, and that's what I am is the mark of what my best performance is. Or in our low points, we point to the bottom, and it really depresses us to say, well, this is what I am. Where you look at your lowest, and you are not your high. You're not your highest, you're not your lowest, you are kind of the average. Your consistency, whatever you can consistently do, that is what you can do. And so to always rate yourself against your highest ever capability, you lose the ability to keep your perspective on other circumstances that may affect it, whether it's travel for a meet, whether it's the body weight that you train at, whether it's the kind of fatigue stresses that you're doing, and whether or not the lifts you're doing in your training are a good estimation of what they would be. Are you used to deadlifting after you squat in a workout, or do you normally have a day in between where so you're having big PRs in the gym, but then you go to the meet and you're not able to transfer that more than just the one time? Consistently, you feel like you're getting there and your training is not indicative of what you're able to produce on the platform. I know that this for me was a big thing, where my expectations about training itself were higher than what I was able to do in reality. I was not able to do those, and so when I shifted my perspective, even using the same weights I was before, just shifting myself mentally and allowing myself to understand that, oh, well, maybe I'm not where I think I should be, and so I can be more honest with the feedback and say, well, if I'm not where I feel like I should be, why is that? Especially if it's somewhere that I've been before. What is happening now? What are the things that I can do to work myself back to that? And if you constantly have this break between those expectations and your reality, you won't ever be able to make progress, because you'll always be pushing a little too hard on the front end of the spectrum, and it doesn't allow you to make progress, because most of the time you have to take a few steps back and say, let's act like I'm not actually as good as I think I am, and then you allow yourself to actually work within the range that will bring you progress. So that's really important. That was kind of the first thing I had. It was my air quotes come to Jesus moment, where you just have to kind of surrender yourself to your own your own reality and say, I'm not lining up with where I think I am, and now that opens me up to the potential of starting to work towards that goal. In the same vein, you have to compare your approach to the goals. If what you're doing is, if the way that you're dividing up your time is not allowing you to do the things that you need to be successful in those, you have to be honest with yourself and reprioritize your time. I was finding that I was, again, thinking too far forward. I wasn't thinking in the here and now of my training, and I wasn't doing the things that I personally needed to do to facilitate those. For me, it really manifested in focus on mobility. I've been struggling with this for a long time, where I would see, okay, well, this is the amount of mobility that I tend to do, but maybe it's not being as efficient. And I would have people say, well, that sounds like too much work. And to be completely honest, while I am not a big proponent of the saying, well, whatever works for you, I think that tends to be a cop-out where we try to justify our lack of attention to detail. I will say that you need as much mobilizing as you need. And if the way that you do things, if the way that your body holds fatigue, if the way that your body resists recovery indicates that you need more than you're doing, you don't really get a say in that and say, well, that sounds excessive. You have to do as much as you have to do. And for me, that really equated to finding a few areas that were underutilized in terms of my approach and attention to that detail, and having to just commit myself to doing what I needed to do. I needed to treat myself like an athlete. I needed to treat myself like I was not as good as I thought that I was, and take more time with the boring stuff and take care of that. It wasn't enough for me just to roll out and stretch a little bit before and after. I was spending about 45 minutes of prep time each time, where I would intentionally roll out. I would put the barbell right there where you see on the back in the safety racks. I would set that down and I would roll out my adductor magnus, which is that nasty little muscle that goes up from your groin down on the inside of your thigh towards your knee. And when I started putting quality attention to that, 45 minutes before my sessions, I was doing that and a few other mobilization drills. After the session, spending 25 minutes doing some more of that. And on days when I wasn't lifting, approaching mobility with saying I need at least 45 minutes to an hour to make sure that I can always hit the positions I need to hit to be successful in these. It sucks. It feels excessive. It sounds crazy to me. But by doing that and committing myself to that, I was able to put myself in some better, not just positions of recovery, but physically I was able to improve my positioning for my squats and for my deadlifts, where I was able to use my leverages more efficiently, more effectively, and it ended up being very beneficial and seemed, when I look at it now, to be very necessary. I will say that it was an extreme example where I had let that get to a point where it was so low because it was such a low priority for me, that moving forward, I'm going to try and find ways to be more time efficient with that, so it doesn't take as much time. But I was kind of digging myself out of a hole that had taken months and years, in fact, to build up, and that's been something that I really have kind of started to embrace and take more seriously now. Hopefully in the future I can find ways to kind of streamline the process and move more towards that, getting more from less, but you still have to do as much as you have to do, even if you are someone who it's just really unfortunate that you hold a bit of a resistance to your recovery or your mobility work just through your body. Some people just have to work harder to do the same thing. That's kind of the nature of genetic differences, and some people just have to work harder. The old saying of, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Well, if talent starts to work hard, you really have to dig in and work even that much harder. And the only thing we can control, you can't control your genetics, you can't control your predisposition to any one pursuit, but what you can control is the amount of effort that you take into account and your work ethic itself. That's the only thing you have any control over. So I'm kind of owning up to my own genetic limitations. And I was telling some people at nationals, it's funny, I was never accused of being genetically gifted until I'd been lifting weights for about 10 years, and I've been doing this for 17 years now. And there's still people who probably could get way farther than I have in half that amount of time, but that doesn't make my pursuit any less worth it to me. That doesn't make the journey any less worth it for me. Another thing that I really was trying to internalize was some mindfulness. Like I said, I have ADHD. I really struggle with distraction, and most of the time when I make errors in my lifting, I will be distracted by thinking about other things. I started to develop the approach of this mindfulness in this moment kind of way of thinking about my lifting, where instead of thinking about how many sets I had to do or what I had to do after the workout, I was prioritizing my life with we're doing this right now, and all of your focus and attention and energy is going into this moment, in this breath. I was taking every single rep of every single set as its own individual moment in time, and really being reductive in terms of how much I was breaking things down to try and get the most positive, my best self, my best performance, my best focus on every single part of the lift, from getting ready to the walkout to in the moments before each rep. And I was thinking, okay, this one rep. And then it also was forcing me to develop different styles of thinking within different contexts of the lifting. So a short-term memory and a long-term memory, but in this case, short-term memory within the set. As soon as something is done, as soon as you do a rep, it doesn't matter what happened in that rep. Take what you can learn from it in terms of the right now of, oh, I didn't activate this, I'm going to change that, but you instantly forgive yourself for making any mistakes, because beating yourself up about those mistakes will not help you in the subsequent reps or sets or anything. It doesn't do you any good to worry and stress and say that wasn't good enough and beat yourself up in kind of an inflammatory way and say, oh, I'm worthless. Or some people really can rely on negative influence, but in my experience, you don't actually benefit from just beating yourself up. That's not to say not being honest with yourself, but in the set, you can only do what you can do. So do what you focus on in this moment. Embody that moment. A lot of people focus on their breathing. Just find something that brings you into that moment so that nothing that happened before or nothing that's happening after is affecting you. Just the right now. That is your short-term memory focus. And then once you've completed the action, once you finish the set, once you finish the workout, then you can kind of engage some long-term memory in the form of being reflective and positively honest with yourself. Instead of thinking of it of, oh, I sucked, that was bad, that was horrible, that's not helpful. That isn't something you can actually learn from and grow and benefit from. But saying, here are a few things that could find areas that can be improved, not areas where you messed up. Find opportunities for growth, not condemnations of lack of adequacy, because that mental state will benefit you more in the long run, and you will learn and grow more from those, and it will let you keep your perspective balanced and in a positive light, where you're accepting that you're not perfect. I forgive myself for not being perfect. I forgive myself for not meeting some expectations that weren't accurate for this moment, but I do know that I can improve them in the future. And what I'm going to do each step of the way, whether it's lifting related or life related or anything that you're doing, I'm going to put my absolute best into the right now moment, finish that, and then move on to the next thing and deal with the situations as they come to me. I'm going to accept that I can't control every aspect and every part of the journey, but I'm going to do my best to cope and learn and grow through the experience as a whole, and to keep moving forward That is all we can really ask ourselves to do. And beating yourself up or getting stuck on any one thing is not going to benefit you in the long run. So it is really not worth your time, effort, or energy to put yourself in the position where you're wasting those very, very elusive factors, those rare commodities. If those are all you have to work with, go ahead and use them the most effective and efficient way possible, because you will benefit more from that in the long run. I want to talk about the way I was approaching things that potentially scared me in a challenging mindset instead of a fear of failure. Fear of failure makes you tentative. Fear in general is just your mental reaction of guessing what's going to happen. If you're thinking about this moment in this, it doesn't really open you up to the potential of that prediction, that negative prediction. Fear of failure is just you're making a negative prediction about what's going to happen, and that's not going to help you. Instead, view it as a challenge. Say, I have reasons to grow. I have things that I can work on and improve. This is an opportunity to find those things and to try and grow through them and potentially prove to myself that I am a little bit further ahead than I thought. That challenging mindset can be a very powerful tool, and combined with some of these other ideas, I found it very personally motivating and driving to kind of pull myself out of this negative mental slump that I was, where I was feeling like I didn't have any control of anything, where I couldn't find a stable base to root myself in. And instead of looking for that and saying, well, I'll have everything figured out once I have a place to live, or once I have this, or once I have that done, instead I was rooting myself in the present moment and just having the acceptance that I can't control everything, but I didn't need to, for me to give my absolute best effort in this current situation, this current moment that I was living in. Another kind of approach is the idea of thinking in terms of loss prevention versus gained outcome. That may seem like it kind of contradicts that last idea, but it is a very powerful tool to use, where you think of it as, I want to do my absolute best in each of these moments, because if I don't, then I'm losing opportunities to get better. Every squat that I'm not treating seriously and having my full focus, that is a squat that I don't get again, that gets taken away from me. And while you can still you want to forgive yourself if that happens and not beat yourself up about it, going into the squat, you want to think of it in that manner of saying, this is a chance to get better. I don't want to lose that. That is much more powerful for us psychologically than thinking about outcome gain, thinking about, oh, this is going to lead me to my goal. You can't know that far. We're in this moment. We're thinking about this right now, and thinking too far in the future will distract you from that moment. And thinking of it in terms of loss prevention, where you accept that you have a limited amount of opportunities to get better and to grow, that needs to have your focus. Don't distract yourself with getting too far in the future. This right now, this here, this present thing is what we keep coming back to, is all you have any control over, just through your own effort and input. So treat every single thing that you do as a chance to work and grow that you may not get again. The next part of it is to humble yourself to this process, to understand it's not going to be easy. You will likely not progress as fast as you want to, but understand that you will probably still find success more quickly than you deserve. We tend to be very impatient. We tend to get ourselves so excited, and I see this after meets. There's a lot of people right now coming off of nationals, myself included, who will benefit from taking a few breaths, again, centering yourself within this feeling, this moment, and saying, I'm not gonna overthink myself, because we will shoot our expectations too high and allow those to rise up. If you did, there's no more motivating time in your training than directly following a meet. You start to get beat down going into meet prep. You might start to lose a little bit of motivation, but then once you get to the meet, the taper hits, you start to feel better, and you will get very motivated. Once you do the meet, whether you do well or whether you do poorly and fall short of your goals, you will be more motivated, depending on your personality type. But most of the time, you will find more motivation from that because you either did really well and you're excited and you're amped up and you want to do more in the future, or you will find yourself... Sorry about that. My recording software decided that it didn't like how long this commentary was getting. I take the hint. All right, computer, you can just settle yourself a little bit. What we were talking about was how after a meet you get very motivated because if you did well, you're excited, you're amped up, you want to continue doing well, you want to continue that kind of direction, and your expectations get blown up even more, where you say, this is what I should be capable of because that went so well. Where if you did poorly, you're saying, I know exactly what I'm going to fix, I'm going to do this, I'm motivated to go and make up the mistakes that I did. But it is really, really important to not get too far ahead of yourself. I am a big proponent of I used to be this way, but trying not to call your numbers months and months in advance, because you have no idea what's going to happen. You don't know what life is going to throw at you or how qualified or prepared you are going to be to deal with those struggles. And it doesn't serve any purpose other than to potentially disappoint you. Because if you just take it as it comes and give your absolute best effort each time, you will always progress as much as you can progress in that amount of time. But if you call your expectations beforehand, you will either reach them or you will fail. The idea of surpassing those goals, a lot of the times people will actually limit themselves by calling their numbers. The better approach, in my opinion, and what seems to be kind of generally accepted through sports psychologists across the board, is if you're giving your best effort, while programming may be important, while the approach and setting some goals for yourself to work towards can be beneficial to provide you with a driving force and motivation, you will get more out of giving your best effort each time. And again, staying present in the moment. Don't lull yourself into this idea of, oh, these are the things I'm going to get to, because you become so focused in on those numbers where you're going to be more harsh on yourself in the times when it is not as easy as you imagine it in your mind. And it will also keep you from going too far on the days when things feel good and you're like, well, I'm way ahead of schedule, and then you end up outrunning yourself and you kind of get ahead of yourself and sabotage your own progress by kind of an overload of that motivation. So I really, really encourage the people who are listening to this, who are competitors themselves or who are kind of in this long haul type of pursuit, not to over predict your progress. You can only progress as fast as you're able to progress, and predicting that is near impossible. So focus on focus on growing through each individual experience, and you will find yourself as far as you can go through the end of it. I don't think you're going to lose anything from saying, I just want to do the best that I can. Yes, having concrete goals to look at is a good way to kind of give yourself a mark and see if you're in the right direction. But I would say don't let those goals get so big and overblown and so grand from time to time. You have to keep them small enough that you can actually affect whether or not they're going to happen. The longer you go between those making the prediction and the time when it actually has to happen, the more likely that you are going to fall short of those goals or experience something in life that's going to pull you off of that, and it's actually going to deter you from being motivated, and that is not a beneficial place to be mentally. And kind of where this is all going is the idea that I've talked about before, and it's kind of the mantra I try to live by. I think it's really easy to say things that are the context is very important in how we say things, and some of the things that we try to embody. A lot of people will say, these words of wisdom, these little quotes that people really take upon themselves, saying that's my mantra, where the context is not addressed often enough. So I try to live within the ones that are to myself. They apply more than just in any one circumstances, and you're seeing them on the screen right now. The Gandalf quote, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us, and my personal mantra of live the grind. those are the embodiment of what I had to find again in this pursuit and in this journey to reorient myself and stabilize what was happening so that I could get back on track and to start moving forward again. It's not about these grand plans that you're making. The reality doesn't care what your expectations are. It will always bring you back to that unfiltered look of what the truth is. So accept those things, learn in each moment more about yourself, and accept that all you can affect, all that you can do is work as hard as you possibly can for the time that you have right now. Put your time, effort, and energy into the things that you care about the most, and make sure that the goals that you have for yourself and the direction that you've set for yourself lines up with the approach that you're taking. Learn to forgive yourself for not meeting your expectations, and understand that recentering yourself every time you're in a new section of that growth is going to allow you to make more progress down the road. Humble yourself to this process and understand that even though it's not always the most fun, living the grind doesn't mean you have to just beat yourself into the ground every time. It means that you're constantly trying to just move forward, and it's not always a straight line. You may falter, you may fall back, and that's where the grind part comes in. It doesn't matter whether everything is easy or difficult or linear or jagged across the line of your progression. The most important thing is that you are giving your best effort towards the things that you care about. And if those things aren't lining up, if you don't actually care about the things that you are saying that you do and your approach is not matching reality, that will be made very clear whenever you get to a high level of performance or expectation. So thank you guys so much. I know this was a very long video, but I think it's very important for me at least to kind of share with you guys the changes that I've been making mentally. And these aren't all new concepts, these aren't all new ideas, but they have been very instrumental in turning the corner in my own approach. And I am very excited for the future. While I'm not going to be calling numbers or anything, I think that I'm in a much better headspace now, and I feel more ready to deal with whatever life throws at me. And these are some of the cornerstones that I am expecting myself to use to do that. So thank you guys very, very much for your continued support. If you're still sticking with this, I'm amazed by you and thankful for you, and I cannot wait to go to the next event and hopefully meet even more people who have found this to be helpful or useful in some way. I appreciate you all so much more than you'll ever understand, and I am so thankful to be back into what I would say is a mentally healthy spot in doing this thing that I love and sharing it with all of you. Thank you so much for doing this journey with me, and I will talk to you all very, very soon. Have a great day. Bye.